longtime viewers of the channel might remember that we used to cover a Jurassic Park card game that I was developing. This was years ago at this point. It was kind of a core feature of the channel when it launched, and then it kind of fell off. Why did it fall off? Well, I was trying to develop expansions to the card game that I already developed for Camp Cretaceous and Dominion in the lead up and window around the release of Dominion in particular. And basically, fundamentally, I didn't enjoy Dominion, right? So Dominion kind of dampened my enthusiasm for working on the Dominion aspect of the card game. And I also started to have some uh, thoughts about how to improve the card game to make it a little bit better, a little bit deeper mechanically to improve the longevity of the game. What I had, before Dominion, which was essentially everything up through Fallen Kingdom and Battle of Big Rock, worked pretty well as like an out of the box type game, but as like an expandable card game, there were a few angles that I was starting to run up against the limitations of the rules. So I wanted to expand kind of the economy, both in terms of, the actual in-game currency and action economy, like how you play out your turn, and make things more flexible to expand the design space available in the game. The iteration of the game that I had been previewing on the channel here was especially pretty restrictive in terms of action economy. You had phases of the game that were very strict in terms of what you did in them. Cloning phase, you would take one cloning action, which was essentially cloning like a new species. Obstacle phase, you would play one obstacle. A lot of that, a lot of play one thing during this phase, and it was not necessarily bad, but it was very very restrictive. Like there wasn't as much design or as much choice to make in it, right? With the design, like there wasn't much give or take. It was very much, oh, I build a new attraction in my park this during this phase because that's what I do during this phase. So I wanted to move away from this restrictive play one card each phase to more of a just play like multiple cards a turn up to a limit, and so you could clone a couple dinosaurs or build a couple attractions or whatever, something like that. um, so I was hashing out the rules for that, rebalancing things. I was expanding the economy to add costs to actions, and it became this whole project that kind of got away from me. Like it's kind of weird, right? Because like it's not like it was an insurmountable project or it was too big to make these changes. It's just that the changes I had to make surpassed my enthusiasm for the project. So that's why I got backburnered for many years. I still want to come back to this and finalize the new version and show that off, but who knows when or honestly if that'll ever happen. So, because we've been doing some CCG stuff on the channel recently with the Jurassic World War uh, pack openings, and then we did the MYA pack openings previously, and there's been some comments over the years about what happened to this. I wanted to touch on this. So here's the plan. We're going to go through, we're going to show off every card I ever developed for what I'm calling the 3.0 version. This was the version I was previously showing off on the channel. And then we'll put out some sort of basic rules thing. I'm probably not going to take the time to put together a comprehensive rules document, but maybe I put together like a short video to like explain the rules, and that way it actually is playable. For anybody who wants to play it like with their friends or something. We'll put up all the card images on the Discord server after all the videos are out, and then that'll be the form it exists in. This version's not being worked on anymore, so this is kind of in a weird limbo state. And the Dominion and Camp Cretaceous add-ons are completely incomplete. The animals were finished, but a lot of the other additions were never finalized, and many of them never had images produced. So I'm not gonna like try to finish any of that. I'm just gonna show off what was finished. So that'll be out there in the wild, and it'll be playable. It's perfectly playable. It's play tested, except for the new additions in Dominion and Camp Cretaceous. Everything up through Battle Big Rock was actually play tested with multiple playtest groups. Like, there is some real effort put into this project, but like a lot of my projects, it's never good enough, and I want to keep pushing it. So that's why I someday would like to see a 4.0, but we'll see if that happens or not. what else? I think that's kind of it. We'll do like videos for every card type. We'll work through everything. I'll go through, discuss, um, some little bits of like behind the scenes logic of the cards, how things work. Um, Especially with like we'll show off like the Dominion cards and the incomplete sets and stuff like that. Those will also be released on the Discord. Those are not play tested, so they're not maybe not balanced, but we're just gonna throw them up there. So in today's video, I want to go through the species. We also have a few. So I did actually at one point, like I've been coming back to this here and there throughout the years. It's not like I stopped all work on this project. It's just never been in a position to really present it. One thing I did do is I actually have chaos theory species in this for the new animals. As part of the rebalancing, when some of the chaos theory seasons were coming out, I did come up with concepts for the chaos theory species. And then I have them with their stat balances as is appropriate for the 3.0. Because at the time that I came up with these, I hadn't worked out exactly how I want to do the stat rebalancing for 4.0. That has been done, but I do have the test cards with the 3.0 balancing. So we're including those here too. I also have deleted content that was never intended to be part of the game at release. I'm just throwing it up here because why not, right? This isn't like the real version exactly, right? So I might as well include everything. So yeah, we'll go through these animals kind of one at a time, essentially alphabetically as they've been uploaded to my little, image displayer here. Starting with Allosaurus. This has previously been previewed, of course. Battle of Big Rock Allo. How about a quick overview of the stats for anybody who is not familiar with the ancient videos? Rarity is your cost. This is how much money you pay to play the card to your park. Income is how much money it makes every turn. Fame is how many victory points it's worth. You need 15 to win. I should maybe explain the balancing of these a little bit too. Rarity 8 is like mid to high. Income 2 is middle of the road. Income is typically 1 to 3. A fame of 4 is on the higher end for a generic species. Starters are 1 fame. Your typical species are 3 to 4. And your big ticket headliners like Tyrannosaurus are 5, and those are limited. Ferocity and security are tied to dinosaur breakouts. Security is essentially the chance that an animal breaks out. So security of 3 is like a coin flip. Wait, is that right? If a 1 is a 1 in 6, a 3 is a 3 in 6. Yes, to break out. And ferocity is how much damage it causes around the park when it breaks out. So that's how much money you lose. So Allosaurus makes $2 a turn, 2 revenue a turn. If it breaks out, you lose 3 revenue instead of gaining 2. So that's kind of the idea there. One of the big changes with 4.0 is I thought the balance towards money gained and the damage caused if it actually escapes is too soft. So these numbers for security and ferocity generally went up across the board to make dinosaur escapes more impactful in the park. They're not, they're not nothing in 3.0, but in practice with playtesting, I ended up feeling like dinosaur escapes were more of a formality than like a core feature, right? So I wanted to push that further. So yeah, we got card subtypes, diet, and then the family categories or whatever, the phylogeny of the animal, which would interact with other card effects. And then we have the effect of the animal itself. Allosaurus has an action, which means during your action phase, where you get to take one action, either by playing an action card from hand or an action of something in play, you can use the Allosaurus effect instead. And then Allosaurus, eats an animal from your hand and gives you some card draw. Kind of a generic effect, not really tied necessarily to the Allosaurus, just referencing the fact that, it's a carnivore, essentially. There's a few effects in the game that arose more from like a mechanical design perspective than from like the actual vibe of the animal itself. And those kind of got shuffled around until they found an appropriate home, or they kind of filled in when there was an animal that was a little too, that lacked like distinctive, behavior or scenes or whatever from the movies that we could call back to. So Allosaurus is kind of one of those, kind of generic. All right, next up, Anki. We made Ankylosaurus is a Thyreophorine alongside with the Stegosaurids. We did not. I decided not to differentiate between Ankylosaurids and Stegosaurids in the game because they are underrepresented in the franchise in general. Um, Ankylosaurus cannot be injured, and then that was the original effect on Ankylosaurus in like 2.0 or whatever was it just can't be injured. Okay, fine. Uh, you know, injuries make your animal less effective and can remove population from your animal, outright killing some members of the herd. So dodging those is not nothing, but it was a little like kind of lacked in some impact. And uh, the adjacency mechanics for the way the game is played um, add to it. They're fun. They're interesting. Having the position of the animals in your park matter was it was just an interesting mechanic, right? So Ankylosaurus was like a good opportunity to kind of expand that. It doesn't really make sense that Ankylosaurus would protect the species surrounding his enclosure from damage, but it was building off of the existing card effect, and it made it more interesting. So it seemed like a thing to do. I'm still happy with this effect. I think it's good. Uh, the thing with card games, they don't have to perfectly represent the film. Sometimes they can just be a little bit more interesting if you push it in a little bit of a different direction, right? Apatosaurus. Apatosaurus is an animal that has no base income because its card effect scales its income based upon the number of herbivores in your park. This is kind of literally a reference to the fact that the Apatosaurus appears in the gyrosphere scene. That's the first time we ever see it in the franchise, which is this area with a ton of herbivores. So it just kind of tied into this idea of having like an herbivore-centric deck build, but then Apatosaurus would kind of be a cornerstone of that, where by itself it's not very effective, but it becomes more effective as in this like herbivore-centric vista, I guess you would say. Atrociraptor, the first of our new Dominion animals. I'll reiterate again, these are not play tested, so the balance is could be problematic on some of these. Looks like we missed an O in Theropod there. That's fun. I'm not going to fix that. Maybe I'll fix that later, but we'll see. Atrociraptor, whenever it succeeds an escape attempt, you choose a rival, a different player that is, to lose money equal to its ferocity. The idea here, this is referencing the use of Atrociraptors as attack dinosaurs in Dominion. This has been reworked for 4.0. I remember distinctly this is one of the animals that I fully reworked. I think we might see the reworked mechanic and the Beckel Spinax in a moment, actually. This is kind of an awkward thing with this, the way I'm presenting these, kind of in between versions. The Atrociraptor is of this came out. I designed this sometime after Dominion. Obviously, Chaos Effect came, or Chaos Theory came later. So the Beckel Spinax is designed based around, the Beckel Spinax design came out when I was firmly committed to the full rebalance of the card game. Whereas this Atrociraptor preceded that and is one of the, Dominion is one of the things that led into the rebalancing. So they're kind of either side of the divide, right? So this is kind of the first attempt at like this sort of like assassin mechanic, is all I'm trying to say, really. Baryonyx can't be. So its attributes are not reduced when injured. So an injury to a dinosaur would kill off a population, or if there were no population markers on the animal, you would turn it sideways to show that it's been injured, and you would reduce all its stats by 1. Because Baryonyx in Fallen Kingdom just sticks its head into a lava flow, we added this card effect here where it doesn't actually get its stats reduced by an injury. It still shows as injury. It could still be killed by being injured a second time with no additional population markers to be removed. But it would not be any worse for the wearer because of the injury. That's what that is specifically referencing. It also has this one clone trigger, so the first time you play the Baryonyx species to your park, the very first time it's cloned, you get this effect where you shuffle a card from your trash pile, your discard, into your deck. This is a Spinosaurid thing. See, all the Spinosaurids in the card game are fishers. They fish something out of the discard pile in some way and do something with it. Baryonyx fishes out a card of your choice and puts it back into the deck. Spinosaurus and Suchomimus have similar but different effects. Beckle Spinax. So the one thing I'll say with the Chaos Theory animals in particular is I have no idea if I had even intended the rarity and income levels to be correct. Because these were developed when I was gonna do the rebalance. So these stats are for 3.0, but may not actually accurately represent the card. We're just gonna roll with it. But yeah, the Beckle Spinax effect here, when it succeeds in an escape attempt, yeah, when the Beckle Spinax succeeds in an escape attempt, it trashes any employee. This means it must kill an employee, but you can target the opponent with it first. And it's got this chaos effect, 1 or 5. It makes an escape attempt automatically. So chaos effect is this mechanic where each turn you flip a card from the top of your deck, and depending on the number up in the corner, you trigger the chaos effects that match. For a species card, species cards are chaos 0, but the other card types in the game have a specific chaos number up in the corner. This is skipped for the species card. They just have the rarity, the play cost instead, for convenience. This has always bothered me a little bit, and it's something I've been considering whether I need specifically the 0 chaos effect, like value on species cards for the sake of clarity, and I just kind of haven't decided on 4.0. And if 4.0 never actually gets finalized, then I don't have to decide. But yeah, for 3.0, you just species cards are always assumed to be chaos 0. So yeah, this effect, essentially the idea here is the Beckle Spinax can be sort of released to go do an assassination. So the reworked Atrociraptor, let's bring him back up for a second. The reworked design for Atrociraptor for 4.0 uses like a variation of the Beckle Spinax effect to have just an inherent chance of making it escape. There actually might be a few different iterations of the assassin mechanic, including a deliberately allowing an escape. I honestly forget where I'd left that off. I've got like design notes, I've got images, and they're all in like various states of things. So that's kind of why. But we'll include the Beckle Spinax in this, even though this is dubious. Brachiosaurus. So Brachiosaurus, you can see here this blue titling. This signifies a starter card. So you get 1 starter species at the very start of the game for your deck. Brachiosaurus is one of them. Brachiosaurus provides additional income while you have no other species currently being displayed in your park, kind of referencing, of course, the fact that it's the first dinosaur we see in the franchise. Carnotaurus. Carnotaurus disables paddock upgrades in rival parks when he's cloned. This is a semi generic effect. This is here on Carnotaurus to reference the gyrosphere seen in Fallen Kingdom. It's an animal that sort of attacks a paddock upgrade, i.e. like an attraction that visitors would use, such as the gyrospheres. And then specifically when this effect was assigned to Carnotaurus, it was made 2 paddock upgrades to reference the 2 horns on the Carnotaurus. Ceratosaurus just makes somebody's trash extinct. That is to say, it takes the discard pile and removes it from the game. This is referencing the Ceratosaurus looking at a big pile of shit on the riverbank and then leaving. This kind of implies he eats shit, but it makes sense for the Cerato, I think. Compy's pretty simply, when he's cloned, you get to draw a card to replace him. This is just one of many card effects that kind of references some various takes on the idea of a swarming dinosaur. Corythosaurus provides a adjacent animals +1 income, kind of referencing the herd scene. There's a bunch of animals present, mixed species. This effect actually has bounced around in development, particularly between Corythosaurus and Edmontosaurus. But it makes more sense on Corythosaurus, so that's the version we're going with. Dilophosaurus. When clone, trash a random card from the rival's hand. So you just pick something blindly from the opponent's hand. It's discarded. This is how I chose to represent poisonous dinosaurs in the card game. For any other poisonous effects, it's a similar thing. Kind of analogous to, like, particularly developed in regard to the Dilophosaurus. Spitting at somebody's eye is kind of analogous to discarding a card from their hand, right? Another Dominion animal, Dimetrodon. This is kind of another generic effect. +1 income while you have a paddock upgrade in the same paddock. So you put an attraction of some kind or a security mechanism on the Dimetrodon's paddock, and he starts to provide more money. Why does he do this? It's kind of just a generic effect that I came up with and had to be assigned to an animal. The Dimetrodon is found in the cave in the movie. Like, what do you get from that? Not every animal can be a perfect one-to-one with its scene in the film, especially if the scene is fairly generic. But it does kind of feel like a Dimetrodon effect to me, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know. Dimorphodon. So Dimorphodon, when it's cloned, it comes in with population counters. So you clone a batch of essentially 3 Dimorphodon at once. But whenever it escapes, it loses 1 Dimorphodon. He flies away and is never seen again. Dimorphodon out of all the pterosaurs feels like the most swarmy one, being the little guy, so that's why this is a Dimorphodon effect in particular. The concept of a pterosaur flying away when it escapes is not necessarily specific to Dimorphodon, but it makes the most sense in conjunction with this additional population mechanic. So that's why that is Dimorphodon. Dreadnoughtus. Now, Dreadnoughtus was actually in the pre-Dominion version of the game because its name was in Fallen Kingdom on the DNA vials, which to me was enough to make it canon. It was reworked for Dominion because we actually see it and can base an effect off of it better. The original version of it is actually what is currently the Sinoceratops, which is a chaos effect modifier. So the effect we went with here for Dreadnoughtus was the idea that cloning a Dreadnoughtus would be difficult. So to clone a new member of the herd to your park, you have to actually pay more than is typical, +2 revenue expense. But since the Dreadnoughtus is this big, impressive animal, every additional Dreadnoughtus actually increases your fame, making it easier to win. Typically, when you clone a new member of a herd, you don't doesn't provide any more points towards your victory. It just provides more money and protects that species from being removed from play by damage. The Dreadnoughtus is an exception. Edmontosaurus. Edmontosaurus is another starter. Whenever it's exhibited, you can draw a card instead of gaining money. So this functions as a draw engine instead of an economic, revenue engine. That's the idea there. This was originally developed as Corythosaurus before being moved to Edmontosaurus because the herding effect, the adjacency effect currently on Corythosaurus makes more sense for that animal. Gallimimus, another starter. I should say for the starting animals, I wanted to divide the subtypes up as much as possible, just for the potential interactions with other cards. So that's why there's not like 2 starting hadrosaurs or 2 starting sauropods. It's trying to be, 1 thyreophore and 1 sauropod, 1 ornithomimosaur, 1 hadrosaur, ceratopsian, etc. Since Gallimimus, of course, is one of the quintessential high population animals in the film series, its effect allows you to make additional Gallimimuses at a reduced cost, kind of the inverse of the Dreadnoughtus. It does not add fame. This is essentially an economic engine. By making it cheaper to clone more members of the herd, you get to increase the income. It goes up by 1 with every additional population, allowing you to quickly invest into a large Gallimimus herd, which will then make you a lot of money. Giga. Giga is our first headliner. That's why its name is in gold. You're allowed 1 headliner species per deck, which is always a big, impressive theropod. I should say the starters are always herbivores. Headliners are always carnivores. These guys are worth 5 fame. Only the headliners are worth 5 fame, so a full third of your victory, but you can only have 1 copy of it in your deck, so it's hard to get. They're also generally very risky with high ferocity and security, being expensive. and so on. Giga is notably a 4 income animal, so that's pretty high. He specifically targets other headliners played by other players and makes them cost more. The idea being that the Giga, of course, in the movie, well, it mostly doesn't do anything, but if it does do anything, it kills the Rex. So it goes up against the Rex, and so that's kind of, this is kind of referencing that duel by modifying other headliners because the T-Rex is a headliner. This does affect other things like paddock upgrades and any headliner card. There is a headliner in your deck for every category of card, every chaos number. So one species, an action, a couple of obstacles, a couple of assets. Herrerasaurus. This Herrerasaurus is kind of another semi-generic effect. An idea I came up with for a species and then thought about what animal would best fit. So this protects your adjacent paddock upgrades, and the paddock upgrade in the same paddock from being disabled, trashed, or made extinct. That is, so disabling is we saw this on Carnotaurus. I didn't really explain it there. It's a temporary, more reversible way to shut down a facility or paddock upgrade. Trashed would straight up discard it from play, not as easily dealt with. Then extinct would remove it from the game entirely, which is irreversible. The reason this effect was assigned to Herrerasaurus is a reference to Jurassic Park the game, where it interacts with the roller coaster. So that's why we did that. Iguanodon, another Dominion animal. Iguanodon has a when cloned effect. Search your deck for any non-species card that is not a headliner. Place in your hand, shuffle your deck. Very generic effect. An idea that came to my head, something that was missing from the animal roster effect-wise, and then it was thrown on the most insignificant, inconsequential animal that does nothing in the movie. Very extremely filler effect, but what are you supposed to do with Iguanodon? Indominus Rex, when this is cloned, it injures a species. So direct damage effect. Very powerful. This is referencing the Indominus Rex eating its sibling when it's cloned, when it hatches as a baby. So that's why this effect is on the Indominus. Pretty happy with this effect. Nice, simple, clean, thematic. I like it. Less thematic is the Indoraptor's effect. 0 income value, but then it scales up in income for the total fame in your park. So this can get to incredibly high values. Very expensive upfront investment, though, with a 16 rarity cost, which is the maximum. This is kind of just referencing the idea of this being like a designer dinosaur and being sold at auction, but in a very vague way. It's, again, kind of an effect that's more of a conceptually generic effect, and then like, this ties in well enough with the Indoraptor, we can make this work. Kentrosaurus, sort of another generic effect. It acts as a lightning rod for obstacles, protecting your other animals from getting targeted instead. The idea here is that in Camp Cretaceous, the Kentrosaurus is sort of the target of a lot of experiments and abuse. So kind of the same idea here, that it ends up getting targeted first. This is fundamentally, though, kind of another generic effect idea I had floating around that was not used, and then an animal came along that it kind of made sense with, so we went for it. Lystrosaurus. The idea with Lystrosaurus was this was a great opportunity for another diverse starter. We needed more starters with the roster expanding in Dominion, trying to maintain a balance between the amount of headliners, starter animals, and generic animals. So essentially I said, well, Lystrosaurus should be a starter because it's a unique herbivore in terms of subtype, being a synapsid. And then from there was kind of, I had to sit and like brainstorm the ideas for like what would be kind of an interesting effect to start the game with. I was never like fully happy with the Dominion starting animals. I really liked the first core 4 that I had, which is like the Gallimimus, the Baraki, and Monosaurus, and actually maybe just the first core 3 I really liked. Stegosaurus was probably the other one, and I never was super sold on the Stego. We'll see that later. And then yeah, coming up with more, I continued to be a little on the fence with these. Oh no, Sinoceratops is the 4th one that I do like. Yeah, Sinoceratops is good. Stegosaurus was kind of the 5th one design, which was a little lackluster. Yeah. So yeah, this ends up modifying your expense costs. So this is reducing the cost of like all the structures you build in your park and a few other cards that have expense costs, like some of the gene mods and actions. Not exactly a Lystrosaurus effect. Um, the best motivation for this is the fact that this guy is in the market, so it's he's tied to this economic structure, which is why he interacts with the economics of your deck. Very loose, very vague. Not very happy with it. Majungasaurus, this guy, he made himself. There no effort needed. He's got a reduced rarity cost relative to his stats, but then he eats his friends sometimes. So during your chaos effect phase, if you flip a 5 off the deck, then he goes ahead and he eats one of his pack mates. Very obvious effect to put on a Majungasaurus. This is perfect, pristine, exactly what this was always going to be. Mamenchisaurus is another fairly generic effect. When cloned until the end of your next turn, you skip obstacle phases. So you can't play obstacles, the opponent can't play obstacles, obstacles being the cards that disrupt the other player, and your opponent can't win. So this is kind of, this is conceptually sort of a card you can play like right when you're about to win to like secure the victory and stop potential disruptions, but only if you have it in that exact perfect window. Why is this Mamenchisaurus? I don't know. It feels like a big effect, like he's blocking stuff because he's so big. This is, a generic effect I was looking for an animal to put it on. Mamenchisaurus is one of the most generic animals in terms of what it does in the franchise. So it's a match made in heaven. Generic effect, generic animal. Metriacanthosaurus. This is a canon animal we never see. We use JWE screenshot for this. The effect then is kind of generic. +3 income while your park has less total fame than all rival parks. The idea here is that Metriacanthosaurus as a mid-sized theropod is a lot more impressive if you don't have a T-Rex or a Giga or a Spinosaurus in the park. So that's exactly the idea here. Your park is less impressive than other person's parks, so he makes more money. It's not exactly one-to-one with the concept because it's referencing other parks as opposed to your park. But mechanically, this is a much more interesting card effect, which is why I went with that. Microceratus, we have 2 different iterations of the art for this. This is the original art with the website design. But then I did a different one when we actually got a film version design for it here. I do have a lot of actual alt arts. I'm not going to go ahead and post all those, but for like cases like this, I've included them. Microceratus is actually our first ceratopsian we've seen here. Interesting. Ceratopsians share similar design space. They all have a chaos effect. They all have different numbers. Some Microceratuses are 0. The reason he's 0 specifically is no horns. There's kind of the numbers for the chaos effects are kind of chosen to reference the animal in most cases, just for a little fun tie-in. Microceratus is set on the website specifically to eat trash. There's like a posting on the Jurassic World marketing website way back in the day that's like, clean up after yourself. You don't want to make the Microceratus sick if he eats your garbage, something like that. So that's what I chose for the reference for the card effect. So whenever you flip this chaos effect 0, he goes ahead and eats something out of the different player's discard pile and gets that card removed permanently forever. Very happy with this effect. I'm actually very fond of the Microceratus. It's not a terribly powerful effect. It's not really that good, but he's also a very, very cheap animal to add to your park. One of the cheapest. So there's a bit of balancing there. Monolophosaurus. This effect is specific to the Monolophosaurus, referencing that, in Camp Cretaceous today, when there's just one Monolophosaurus around, it's timid, you don't have to worry about it, but they get more brave when they're in a bigger group. So Monolophosaurus is given this additional effect here that scales more strongly with pack size. Whenever you clone an additional Monolophosaurus population, instead of just adding 1 income, it effectively adds 2 income, but also 2 ferocity. So when you have 1 Monolophosaurus in your park, if he escapes, he's completely benign. He doesn't do anything. But then as you expand the size of the pack, they can very quickly cause substantial damage in the park if they do escape. And his chance to escape with this 3 security rating is pretty high. Again, the security check is you flip a card from the deck compared to the security rating. If the number is lower, he escapes. And of course, the chaos value for all species is 0. So 0 less than 3. Whenever you flip a species card, it always causes an escape, effectively. That'll be more clear when I do a rules video. Moros Intrepidus. So this guy is a little fella. He actually provides no income. He's one of the cheapest species in the game. The effect he has is a reference to the Parasaurolophus effect, which we'll see later. Para was developed with the idea that it shared a paddock with Brachiosaurus in the very first film. It was based on that idea. Moros is a twist on that, allowing both para can be put into the upgrade slot of a paddock instead of the animal slot. So you can have a Brachie paddock with Parasaurolophus in it. And Moros acts the same way because we see it doing like the teeth cleaning on the Giga in the movie. So there's a reference to that. It can occupy that upgrade slot. But specifically, you have to put it in a paddock with a carnivore if you want this thing to actually make money for you. If you put it in with an herbivore, that's perfectly legal. It just doesn't really do anything beyond providing your 3 fame to potentially win the game. But in a carnivore slot, it becomes pretty lucrative. Mosasaurus is another headliner, another big, important animal. The Mosasaurus has very high ferocity, but very low security, to kind of reference the fact that it's an aquatic, it's stuck in this lagoon, it can't easily escape. But if it did escape, it would cause a lot of damage. When he's cloned, he eats an employee in a park. This is a reference to the Mosasaurus eating Zara in Jurassic World. Turned into a game effect. You wouldn't want to eat your own employee, obviously, so it eats somebody else's employee. Does that make sense? No, not exactly, but that's how card games work. You have the effect has to be relevant. Otherwise, why would you ever use the card? We could balance it in a way where he eats your own employee and he has like really good stats or something, but then there's ways to play around that. It becomes awkward, and this is just an interesting effect to have in the game, this kind of like targeted removal effect on an animal. And it makes the most sense for the Mosa. Pseudoceratops, second Ceratopsian, again, chaos effect 2, draw 2, because he's got 2 horns. This is a generic Ceratopsian effect. Essentially all the Ceratopsians have generic effects, and then I assign them to the animal that they felt the best on. That's kind of the idea there. So if this was draw 1 card, it wouldn't be that interesting. If this was draw 3 cards, it'd be kind of too good, probably. 2 is like the nice in-between where like it's pretty big and impactful when it happens, but not like a crazy swing. So that seemed like the perfect fit. Nothosaurus, this is one of the aquatics in the franchise. When he's cloned, he disables a facility in a rival park or trashes a disabled facility in a rival park. Kind of a generic effect again, referencing the fact, specifically this references the fact that when the Nothosaurus is encountered in Camp Cretaceous, he's inside this facility on the Manticore Island, doing stuff. Yeah, and that's just kind of the idea there. Nothing too substantial. He's fairly cheap. I thought just the idea of disabling a facility versus like trashing a disabled one would be cool. Tyrannosaurus, this is another starter species, being a non-hadrosaur ornithopod, allows it to differentiate it from a monosaurus. Start of your turn, first turn you flip over the top 10 cards of your deck, find an asset there, and play it for free. Not my favorite effect. Like, it's an interesting enough starting effect to get like this extra free card, essentially, something you can kind of build a vibe around, but not amazing. It's something that maybe would make it into 4.0 or maybe be reworked depending on if I could come up with a better idea. Maybe I don't remember. Does this tie into a Tyrannosaurus at all? Not really. The big thing is like the Tyrannosaurus is encountered at a boat dock, which would be a facility, which is an asset, so kind of matches the vibe. Oviraptor, another animal that really designed itself for Dominion here. Whenever somebody else in another park makes additional population, you get a little bit of money from that as a kickback. kind of a reference to this thing eating eggs in the prologue. Somebody makes an egg, he gets excited, and you get money. Sort of the idea there. Pachycephalosaurus, just kidding. Pachycephalosaurus has an adjacency effect where it reduces the damage caused by your carnivores when they escape. The idea being that this, Pachycephalosaurus is kind of intimidating almost in a way with, his domed head. Honestly, this is kind of a generic effect that I had the idea for, and then it kind of happened to work out well that we could do a carnivore and an herbivore version of this for Pachycephalosaurus and Stygimoloch. Just kind of a case of like, this effect feels appropriate enough for a Pachycephalosaurid, and we happen to have two, and so we can do both versions. Pachyrhinosaurus, this is another ceratopsian trigger. The original art for this guy in the pre-Chaos Theory days was this Pachyrhinosaurus here from the live tour. Pachyrhinosaurus, of course, was canonized by Fallen Kingdom, where its name shows up, but we never had a design. So this is a Jurassic franchise Pachyrhinosaurus design, just not the one we ended up actually getting in Chaos Theory. The effect, like all ceratopsians, is kind of generic. Chaos Effect 4, referencing the fact that he's got this big, chunky, square-like nasal boss instead of horns. It kind of feels like a 4. And then he gets this generic effect of producing additional money. Nothing too particular to Pachyrhinosaurus there, of course. Parasaurolophus, I mentioned this before, but he puts himself on the upgrade slot of a paddock, allowing you to double up. This is, of course, unlike the Morose, this guy always provides income, so the benefit of putting him in the upgrade slot is fairly negligible. It allows you to stack adjacency bonuses from things like the Cretaceous Cruise or Corythosaurus. It works well with Corythosaurus in an adjacent paddock to provide even more adjacencies. But of course, he blocks you from putting an upgrade, so you can't have like a gyrosphere in the same enclosure. So there's give and take with this. Definitely a fairly minor effect, which is why he's so cheap as the balancing effect. And of course, as I mentioned before, referencing the lagoon scene in Jurassic Park 1. Here is cut content. Peloroplites. We had card designs for Peloropites and Tyrannophonius, the carcasses from Fallen Kingdom. Neither animal has ever been depicted alive in the franchise. So for the Peloroplites, I took a set image, I think, from Fallen Kingdom or something. And then I took just a basic PNG of this guy from Wikipedia and pasted it in front of that. Never liked that. That's why this was cut. That's also why Tyrannophonius was cut. Without a live depiction of these animals, I kind of didn't want to commit to having them actually exist. Peloroplites and Tyrannophonius directly reference each other with the fact that they can be discarded from your hand as an action to do an effect. Referencing the fact that we only ever see these guys dead, which is why they go to the discard pile. Proceratosaurus, another Jurassic Park 1 animal that's never been seen on screen. His effect is kind of a generic swarm type effect. When you clone the Proceratosaurus, you can clone another species or an additional population for a species that turn. Normally, you only get to take one clone action a turn, but Proceratosaurus is essentially a free clone. Not in terms of money, but in terms of actions, right? Pteranodon. Pteranodon is another pterosaur with another effect that references the idea that when these animals escape, they would lose something because they could fly away. In this case, Pteranodon picks up a card from the opponent's hand and keeps that card tucked away until he gets out. And then when he escapes from the aviary, he drops it, and then it goes back to the opponent. Kind of a fun little type of effect referencing a series of Magic cards that I remember from back in the day, Magic the Gathering. Faceless Butcher, I forget the other guy. A bunch of things from Torment, like classic early 2000s Magic. But also fits very well with Pteranodon picking stuff up in the franchise, carrying it away, and then dropping it. So that's why the effect is here. Pyroraptor. The concept for Pyroraptor was another animal with scaling income value. Specifically, he would gain income for cards in your hand. Now, the question you might ask, what does this have to do with Pyroraptor? Well, if I wanted to show the opponent the number of cards in my hand, I would fan them out like a tail fan. That's the idea. Quetzalcoatlus. This was another take on the pterosaur, design space of having effects that triggered with escape attempts. However, instead of there being a negative escape effect on cats, it's a positive one. And this is because in Dominion, they turn off the air deterrent thing to use the cats against the incoming plane. So I kind of wanted to reference that with the design here. So when Ketz escapes, it actually goes into the opponent's park and ruins, temporarily breaks down one of their exhibits, one of the paddock upgrades. So like a tour vehicle or damages a fence, that kind of thing. I think this is a pretty appropriate effect for Quetzalcoatlus. Velociraptor gains ferocity for every additional population, then randomly adds free population to the animal. This is a double-edged sword, classic double-edged sword, referencing the raptor's breeding in the first movie. So you get this random chance that you breed a new raptor without you intending to breed one, but then as the pack grows, they get a little scarier, kind of like Monolithosaurus. Tyrannosaurus Rex. This is a headliner, of course, with the gold title. This is obviously, the JP Rex, the big headliner from the first movie. Other carnivores in your park get reduced ferocity because she is queen of the island. Everything, bows before her is kind of the idea there. But only if they're of less ferocity than the Tyrannosaurus. So she still, conceptually is still challenged by things like Spinosaurus and Giganotosaurus, as opposed to dominating over them. Scorpius Rex has two versions, specifically two arts for the card. Same effect, referencing specifically the fact that there were two of these in Camp Cretaceous. It's a headliner, so you can only actually have one in a deck, but you can always add population to it, right? And as a poisonous animal, the Scorpius Rex has the poison effect of discarding cards from the opponent's hand. In this case, it's kind of an upgraded version of the Dilophosaurus, discarding 2 random cards from the hand. Because it's a headliner, it gets that more powerful effect. Stegosaurus, specifically Stegosaurus, had this card art originally. This is the JP Institute art for Stegosaurus, the only official representation this guy had in the franchise. I then pasted it into this Fallen Kingdom concept art here to make a full card image. Now that we have it in the franchise, I did produce at some point an alternate art using the Jurassic World Evolution 2 promotional image for him. So we've got both of those here. This is another generic effect referencing kind of the swarming nature of this small theropod. Whenever you add population to it, you get to draw a card. So you can, by specifically investing your clone actions into cloning more Stegosaurus, you get card draw. He functions as a card draw engine. That's the idea there. Sinoceratops is another starter animal. Whenever you pull a chaos effect, you may add 1 to the chaos. This works well with your other ceratopsians, giving you more flexibility to trigger their effects. Effectively, every chaos number you pull can be played out as a different number, depending on whether or not you want to. This was originally Dreadnoughtus, but was moved to Sinoceratops when I wanted to diversify the subtypes of the starting animals, and I wanted a ceratopsian. It made sense for the chaos effect to be on ceratopsians because they were at that point already the animals that had chaos effect triggers. So, speaking of chaos effect trigger for the Sino-Spino, or the Spinoceratops, as the franchises seem to settle on for the name of this, that went back and forth in marketing and stuff. And at the time when I developed this, Sino-Spino seemed to be the favored one. But yeah, now it seems to be Spinoceratops. So this is a combination of the Ceratopsian chaos effects with the Spinosaurid fishing things out of the discard pile. So this is a chaos effect 5 to grab a card from your discard pile and place it into your hand. Very similar to the upcoming Spinosaurus we'll see, but the downside being that it's really hard to trigger, but it can re-trigger, right? Whenever you pull that number. Smilodon. Smilodon is pretty generic, doesn't do that much in the show. It's a cheap carnivore. And then if you have a paddock upgrade, he becomes extra secure. Completely generic effect, kind of assigned to Smilodon for the lack of there being anything else to assign here. So the idea is you have a nice cheap animal that's got a pretty high chance to escape, but if you can get some sort of paddock upgrade, be it an attraction or some sort of security upgrade, well, then you can lock him down pretty well, and he's a nice cheap animal that generates a little bit of money. Spinosaurus, I mentioned, of course, is very similar to Spinoceratops. When you clone this guy, you get any card from your hand and put from your discard pile and put it in your hand. Again, he's a fisher, right? He's a Spinosaurid. He fishes something out of the discard pile, catches it, and gives it to you. Stegosaurus, another starter. This is the Thyreophorans starter. He draws 4 cards at the start of your first turn, giving you an extra big starting hand. This is a direct reference to the Andromeda character from Netrunner. This effect came into mind when I was trying to brainstorm something for Stegosaurus. He's got 4 spikes on his tail. Andromeda draws 4 extra cards. Boom, Stegosaurus. I don't love this effect. This is a little blah. Andromeda is an awkward card in Netrunner. Like, I'm already aware of the problems that animal, or that effect, causes. So to deliberately introduce it into my game on an animal is a little, but I haven't been able to come up, at least at this time, I hadn't come up with a replacement effect for Stego as a starter animal. So that is the version that is in 3.0. Stiggy is the herbivore version of Pachycephalosaurus, reducing the ferocity values of your adjacent herbivores so they cause less damage should they escape. Suchomimus. We have the website design as it appears in Jurassic World Evolution, and we have an alt art for Chaos Theory. Suchomimus is, again, a fisher. He grabs a random card from your discard pile and puts it in your hand, so a downgraded version of the Spinosaurus effect. Spinosaurus lets you choose. This guy doesn't. Then Tarbosaurus. This is the Camp Cretaceous Hidden Adventure animal. A generic effect, kind of referencing the randomness of the choose your own adventure angle of Hidden Adventure. So whenever you pull the chaos effect, whatever that number is for that turn is how much additional income and ferocity he gets. So he can potentially make very little money for his cost or a lot of money for his cost. But then that's offset by the fact that if you're making a lot of money, he's also going to cause a lot of damage if he escapes that turn instead of... And then you don't get the money, right? You only lose the money. So there's a little bit of a risk here. Not the most amazing effect, but it kind of matches the vibe a little bit. It's sufficient. Here's another cut content card, Teratophonius. This image here was a Photoshop somebody did for the Teratophonius carcass. We have an image of the carcass in like a shop, and somebody like cut it out, trying to make it look alive. And I use that. Now, I don't like using other people's work, so that's largely why this was cut. And not having a living example of that animal to use for card art also sucks. But we've included it here as cut content. If this is your image, I apologize, but I don't know who you are anymore. This is like 4 years old. This is, of course, has this trash from hand effect as an action, referencing the same effect on Pleuropleides, because they're both only shown as carcasses. This one gets you cards, and Pleuro got money. So they're just kind of generic effects that are counterparts to each other, and then assigned to the Fallen Kingdom corpses. Therizinosaurus is another Chaos Effect X, which is kind of a new effect added for the Dominion expansion. This is kind of a riff on the Pachycephalosaurid adjacency effect, also referring to how the Therizinosaurus challenges the Rex and the Giga and whatnot in the conclusion of the film. So he gets this randomized effect that reduces the ferocity of carnivores and then increases his ferocity. Not the greatest effect conceptually for the theory, but like that's what I got. Probably something I would have continued to workshop a little bit if I continued to work on it. But yeah, that's what we got. That's what you get. And finally, Triceratops, the last of the Ceratopsians. Chaos Effect 3 gains fame. Never been super stoked for this effect, because most turns this doesn't matter. Fame only matters when you hit the threshold. So it's only when you get to 13 that this effect starts to matter. Chaos Effect 3, because it's Triceratops, 3 horns, Chaos Effect 3. This should be reworked. I don't think I ever came up with another effect for it, but I think it was planned to be reworked for 4.0, but that's the 3.0 version. That's what we originally previewed on the website, so that's what we're sticking with here. All right, so that's every animal card that's been developed for the 3.0 version. And yeah, next time we'll move on to the other card types and eventually show off everything. And at least it'll be out there. You know, there's no more wondering what else was in the game. In the original version, I started showing off. It's there. It's out. It exists. And if I never get 4.0 finished, then at least we have this. Till next time.